Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for liking, subscribing, supporting, patrons. You're awesome. Seriously, I can't thank you guys enough. Our Sangha continues slowly. It grows, but those likes and those subscriptions are all important on YouTube to get more people to find this Sangha. Yeah. So I went back to the house yesterday or day before, at any rate, and there's this human behavior. We talk about Buddhism all the time, but I want to give you a really direct example of what the Lankavatara is talking about here, and what Shakyamuni is discussing. This idea. Excuse me, while I get this chair situated. Okay. So this idea of identification, you hear me say it all the time, right? Discernment, not discernment, but discrimination, and identification stuff. What do I mean? So I walk in the house, and Sandra is on the computer, and she's been feeling unwell for weeks now. Combination of some vertigo, headaches, nasal drainage, this feeling in the back of her, soft palate throat area of like some swelling, but it almost feels like a big ball of mucus. But, it's just that general discomfort, the change of seasons and so forth. We have all kinds of ways of discussing that. In Mississippi, a common term is the crud, right? Because it makes you expectorate and so forth. But she wasn't running a fever, and she wasn't having bowel problems. It was all congestion and coughing, breathing. Sounded like Omicron to me, but no. Okay. Anyway. I walk in the house, and she goes, I found it. She's on the computer, and she's surfing all over the web, and she's trying to find a name for what she's experiencing. I'm sorry, I'm giving away the plot. So this is it. This is the name. This is what I've got. It describes all the symptoms I'm having. And it stunned me for a moment, especially perhaps because we're talking in the Lankavatara about this, but it struck me so hard that here was this perfectly logical, intelligent human being scouring the internet after weeks, and she's been to a doctor. So I don't want to make it sound like she's, okay. And she found a word. That's not the way she would think of it, but she found a word. And that word was a wonderful packaging of all her perceived symptoms. And somehow she felt empowered by this. Her health didn't change, but mentally, she now had some semblance of control. She identified her whole situation under one handy word. And I didn't say anything because, but think about that. How does that, knowing that word, give her a sense of relief? It's all mental, right? That relief comes from, if she can label this thing, then in a way she owns it. Do you see what I mean by that? Because I can put a label on it, now I can take all of these symptoms that make me run this way and that, and the cacophony of not feeling well, the anxiety, the stress, and I can patch it all up underneath one word, and now, somehow, in my mind, that ownership gives me some sort of control, some sort of knowing. It's such a castle of wind. It's like you build those structures with playing cards and they just fall all. And the lessons of the Lankavatara, the lessons of Buddhism, just came crashing into my mind, and I was speechless. I didn't know how to approach letting her know what she was doing and how twisted and illusory it all was. It had so much importance for her that I almost felt bad that if I pointed it out, she would then be back in that mire of hunting for an answer. Wow. What a microcosm of exactly what human samsaric life is all about. This is the very scenario that we're constantly doing, that Buddhism identifies as the crux of our pain and suffering, our anxiety and stress. Because we do that, because we labor under the illusion that if we just could thingify things in a pyramid, somehow that would solve everything. The more I thought about it, the more it made me sad. But I thought, I really need to share this with everyone because we all do it. We're not aware of just how constantly we do it. But castles made of sand, yeah? All right. So that's our introduction today into the Lankavatara. This just continues to get a little more interesting. Mahamati still trying to understand why isn't the answer in the words. I have this. I know what it is now. Good for you. Further, Mahamati says, according to you, emancipated one, in all things that are variously discriminated by discrimination, there's no thing. There's no self-nature. This is just a play of the samsaric mind to grab. This is grasping, putting names to things, somehow making them more real. So according to you, all things variously discriminated, identified, they're like grasping air, yeah? As it is nothing but the creation of false imagination, or of the mind, right? If, emancipated one, if Shakyamuni, if Buddha, it is but the creation of false imagination, and there is nothing in the world which is to be conceived as indicative of a self-nature. Does it not come to this, according to your statement, that there is neither defilement nor purification because all things are of the nature of false imagination? In other words, how can you discern good or bad if everything that we identify is by its very nature not self-nature? That's all illusion. So how is there good illusion, bad illusion? How can you make a judgment about something that isn't, fundamentally? So Shakyamuni says, well, Mahamadi, it is just as you say. The self-nature of things is the discrimination of the ignorant and the simple-minded, and it is not as it is discriminated by them. You can invent all the words and parameters and terms and words you want, but the things you are identifying are not those words. They are not those ideas. Mahamadi, it is the creation of false imagination. Nothing indicative of self-nature is to be ascertained. Things are happening moment to moment. Things are manifesting of potential moment to moment. Just because you observe it and then you give it a label doesn't give you this magical power of making something exist permanently as this label or anything else. That's your grasping, trying to possess, trying to own the nature of something, even if you don't understand that. That's what your mind is trying to do, is establish a firm ground, like walking on thin ice. Mahamadi, it is the creation of false imagination. Nothing indicative of self-nature is to be ascertained. But, Mahamadi, there is the self-nature of things, such as is ascertained by the wise. There's that perspective shift, right? By their wise knowledge, by prajna, by their wise insight, by their wise transcendental vision. In other words, yes, stuff is going on. Stuff exists, but it exists in a momentary instantiation of expression of potential. The problem is that the samsaric mind wants to say, this now is and will always be, this ownership, this grasping, this making permanent of something, rather than recognizing its usefulness, its existence, moment to moment, as a participatory momentum, a participatory experience. There is no ownership. There is just being in life. Any attempt to hang on to manifestations is slipping you away from life. You're losing that, and you're actually retarding yourself because life moves on. So what are you doing anchoring yourself? You're watching life leave you. Mahamadi responds, if there is the self-nature of things such as is ascertained by the wise, by their wise knowledge, by the wise insight, by their wise transcendental vision, which is neither human nor celestial vision, and if there's no such self-nature as is discriminated by the ignorant and simple-minded, how can the ignorant and simple-minded abandon their discriminations, as they have no way to recognize the presence of an exalted reality? In other words, how does a regular person get to know this enlightenment? How does one awaken? If one is a regular person, as defined here, then everything we experience is discriminated and identified. Then how can we have any hope or method or design by which we can ascertain the true nature of all phenomena, of all things, of all our discriminated reality. How do we have any hope? For they are neither perverted nor unperverted. They're just doing, that's samsara. They're just doing what their mind, their brain does. That is, they are what they are. Why? Because they are unable to have an insight into the self-nature of exalted reality because they see the course of things in the aspect of being and non-being. That's where they exist. And the reality cannot be such as is discriminated even by the wise, because the aspect of reality as it is in itself cannot be an object of discrimination by anybody. Because what appears to the wise as the self-nature of reality is no more than the creation of their imagination. It's getting slippery here. Which is predictable or predicable based on with the notion of causation and no causation. That is, they also cherish in their own way the idea of being with self-nature. So even these superior people, you guys are still identifying, right? So how's that any different? Not only how do we have access to this higher reality, but also those who claim higher reality are really just doing the same thing, just applying different labels to it, right? Can seem that way. And they would say that this is a realm that belongs to somebody else and is not that of the ignorant. This is committing the fault of non-finality. For thus, what constitutes the self-nature of reality becomes impossible to know. So how can you claim to know something that's impossible to know? What is derived from the imagination cannot be the self-nature of reality. How is it that while things are said to exist owing to the imagination, or discrimination, identification, they are said again not to be such as are imagined? There's something going on in the mind that Shakyamuni is trying to get Mahamadi to understand, that though the mind is doing its thing, it is not the judge of, the manufacturer of the processes of life and the universe. It is but a witness. And the confusion comes in taking, as those who are unenlightened, unawakened, unaware of the Buddhist teachings, just regular folk, mistake that observation as fact, establishing an existence of something as though it is permanent, that it is, because of their observation, they're witnessing things being or made, produced, without realizing that the production is happening at the same time as the self. Listen, quantum is struggling with this too. It's the many worlds problem. And that's a bad label for what the quantum theory is about that. It's not that they're instantly, like Schrodinger and so forth, many worlds constantly being established by every thought and every movement. That's not it at all. It's a discussion of potential and identification. That when we individually identify something, we have identified it and it is real in that moment. For us, with us, around us. But that potential it's like a field. If I can slip into science for just one moment. We talked one day about electrons and why are all electrons all over the universe the same? Why are they the same mass, same charge? How is that even possible? And the solution to that is simply there's an electron field that pervades all of space-time, and that electrons as identified all maintain the same properties that that field does. But here's the problem of perception, and this should be revised and shouldn't be talked about in this way in quantum discussions anymore, is the collapse of the wave function. The English around that, the words around that are very misleading. It would lead you to believe that if you see an electron, if you measure an electron, if you witness an electron in an atom, that you have collapsed the electron field, and therefore the electron field no longer exists. It's been collapsed into that electron. This is completely wrong. The only thing that has collapsed, and again, I don't like that word, but is the perception of the observer. In other words, at the moment an electron is identified, the focus, the knowledge, the inclusion of the entire field of electrons is discarded by the observer. It doesn't disappear. It isn't completely represented in that one electron. The electron is simply one momentary manifestation of the potential electron. Zzz. Potential doesn't know numbers. It doesn't know discretion. It is a source, a potential. Because again, source indicates like there's billions and billions of electrons. No, it's a potential for a manifestation of certain tendencies and conditions, which is, in this case, an electron. So again, identification doesn't obliterate potential. It simply witnesses a potential manifested. And there it is in quantum. Living life with that kind of understanding, that kind of perception of reality, do you see how that liberates you from all of chair being that one chair? That it is just a suchness of chair. Do you get the allusion to quantum now? That electron witness is a suchness of electron field. That's how everything is. Suchnesses. What a perfect word to grasp the idea of tendencies and conditions. There's no end result. There is only in progress, in process. That's life. It's it's a difficult shift of experience to maintain. You get moments of it and you go, I get it. And as soon as you get it, you slip into samsara, yeah? So Mahabodhi is really struggling with this. This is committing the fault of non-finality, for thus what constitutes the self-nature of reality becomes impossible to know. It's impossible to hold in place because everything is moving. So that's what he's trying to say. It's impossible to know. What he's saying is it's impossible to stop time-space, to make this a knowable thing. What he means is permanent. What he means is collapsing the field of possibility into this one thing. And if that were really the case, then we would experience that one thing and never again would it appear in our experience of life. How horrifying is that? That'd be like falling into a black hole. So, emancipated one, what is derived from the imagination cannot be the self-nature of reality. Right? How is it that while things are said to exist owing to the imagination then, or discrimination, they are said again not to be such as imagined? He's having a hard time expressing himself because nothing he said is wrong. He's having trouble understanding, yeah? Emancipated one, is it true that according to the way the imagination is carried on, the self-nature of reality conceived may vary? For when the cause is not alike, the notion of reality that thus comes to be cherished may not be alike. Yeah, the fountain analogy. Your notion of the fountain you walked by in the park an hour later may not agree with somebody else who walked by the fountain an hour later. That's exactly right. But according to you, Mahamati says, while the imagination is kept on going with the wise as well as with the ignorant, the latter alone fail to see reality as it is, and you tell us that the reason why it is said that things are not really such as they are imagined by the imagination is to make all beings discard their imagination. Now, is it that in order to have all beings free from the notion of being, which is realism, and of non-being, which is nihilism, now he's making an either or, you in turn make them cherish a realistic view of existence by telling them to uphold the idea of the self-nature of reality, whereby they are led to cling to the realm of noble wisdom. You've just given us a different target. Why do you deny the truth of solitude? Again, that word, it's wrong. By teaching the doctrine of reality whose self-nature is, according to you, noble wisdom. Boy, he really doesn't get it. So, Shakyamuni responds, Mahamati, it is not true that I deny the truth of solitude, or what did I decide to replace that word with? Nor that I fall into a realistic view of upholding the noble doctrine of self-existing reality. These are all word manipulations of Mahamati's misunderstanding. But in order to save all beings from becoming frightened, because this is earth-shattering stuff, yeah? Who are addicted from beginningless past to the notion of self-nature, it is told them that there is a truth of awake separation from this. Not solitude so much as quietude. An unengaged being. By teaching the doctrine of reality whose self-nature is, but in order to save beings from becoming frightened who are it is told that there is the truth of quietude after making them realize by means of noble wisdom that reality in its self-nature is made the subject of attachment by the ignorant. It's not that things don't exist. It's that the mind wants to attach itself. Its identity is dependent upon identification. That's what we're pointing to here. That's what we're talking about. It's the very construct of a self, of a mine, of I own, of this is what represents what I am, that is the error. It's the mental ownership of the physical world that creates all of our stress and anxiety. It's the term, the word, that means that embraces all of our experience that we invest in as an aha, now I know, which is the illusion. Leads us astray, makes us forget what we actually are. Much, much larger, greater, unfathomable. I don't know. How many adjectives can we come up with? Mahamati, the doctrine of self-nature is not taught by me. Buddhism isn't about the existence of things. It's about where the existence of things are generated, what our relation, our mind of experience, of witnessing, is preoccupied by, is falsely imagined, the reason for being, the raison d'être, right? The big question, who am I? What am I here for? What am I doing? You're exactly that, doing, witnessing. But what we do in samsara is immediately grasp at things in order to identify that self, instead of simply being and experiencing that self. We anchor ourselves. That is where the suffering begins, because it's wrong. It's an illusion. It's stopping our momentum. How do we describe this in words? Mahamati, the doctrine of self-nature is not taught by me. But, Mahamati, those who have realized by themselves truth of quietude, of the mind, as it really is, and are abiding in it, will see that the existence of errors has no form. That's a perceptive choice. And thereby knowing that what is seen is nothing but the mind itself, seen as owned, seen as permanentizing, thingifying, trying to identify, is a mental construct. They are kept away from dualistic viewing an external world under the aspect of being and non-being. They are stamped well with the stamp of suchness, which is acquired within themselves, not by identifying outside themselves, and thus get away from such ideas of reality as to lead them to realism and nihilism. It's a false choice. You don't have to decide between things and no things. That your witness mind it is not made by, is not conceived of that duality. It's simply witnessing the instantiations of potential through time, moment to moment to moment. Be that process. Further, Mahamati, the thesis all things are unborn, is not to be maintained by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva as valid. See, the words are slippery here. When I say things are unborn, I don't mean that you should, in your mind, think that you're looking at stuff that doesn't exist. But it's that mental activity, that connection that the mind wants to make to things being manifest, things created, static, that mentation is inaccurate. That everything we perceive as static is actually moment to moment arising, abiding, and dissolving. As we are, as the universe is, as all things in time-space are simply representations of potential manifesting moment to moment. So terms like born are a language of permanence, but it's really a mental construct, isn't it? Just like language itself. And it's misleading. Of this thesis, it is to be stated that anything of which something is asserted partakes thereby of the nature of being, and that the reason for this thesis is characterized with the quality of birth. While it is being asserted by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva that all things are unborn, the very assertion destroys this thesis. So all of this wordage is to uncover that mechanism of mind that wants to make permanent, wants to own, wants to grasp. It's like grasping at time. What a hopeless endeavor, yes? How can you grasp time? If you could even conceive of doing that, which is what the samsaric mind is trying to do, wouldn't you it's like being on a train and watching fence posts go by and then opening the window of the train and reaching out and grabbing a fence post. If it didn't tear your arm off, you would at least understand that that time no longer is relevant to your time frame, to adopt Einstein's framework of verbs and words and nouns. That the time frame of the person on the train can't simply reach out into the time frame of the area outside the train and hold it. Right? I mean, that's really obvious. It seems it breaks the brain to think that one would even think that way. And yet, this is what we do all the time in life. And Shakyamuni is trying to identify that specific thing. The thesis that all things are unborn acts against the one who holds it because it is born of the principle of mutuality. Even when this thesis of no birth is to be maintained within the extent of existence itself, the notion of no birth cannot hold itself in it. And the statement, the thesis, that all things are unborn is destroyed, since it is dependent on the members of the syllogism. So if you're a thinking human being with a sentient mind, your modus operandi is thingification. And to consider that things are not born breaks your experience of reality. Right? But that's the point. If broken, then what's really going on? And this is the opportunity to view, to experience life from a different perspective. It doesn't deny the existence of everything in the universe. It's just a paradigm shift. It just unglues your mind from its identification through thingifying and separates that mind experience as something in and of itself. As regards the thesis maintaining no birth of being and non-being, Mahamadi, this thesis, to be valid, must be within the limits of existence itself. Buddha, is only experienceable within this samsaric kind of a conundrum, yeah? Because without that sentient mind, this perspective shift, there's nothing to maintain it, to uphold it, right? But there is no aspect of existence which can be regarded either as being or as non-being, because the regarding part is the mind at work. If Mahamadi, no birth of all things is to be asserted by this thesis of no birth, the very attempt defeats the thesis itself. That's what leads to nihilism, right? Therefore, this thesis is not to be upheld as an actual physical reality, because many faults come out in connection with the members of the syllogism, and because in these syllogistic members there is a mutual mixing up of reasons, this thesis is not to be upheld. It's an expedient means. It's a way of constructing a story around a realization. It is not in itself fact. It is a shift of perspective, of knowing, of understanding, of being with. As with the thesis that all things are unborn, so with the thesis that all things are empty and have no self-nature, neither is to be maintained by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. But Mahamadi, this is to be pointed out by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that things in their self-nature are like Maya, like a dream, for they are in one way perceived as existing, permanent, and in another way not perceived as such, and all things are thus seen in two ways: samsara, enlightenment. In accordance either with knowledge or ignorance. Let it be pointed out that all things are like Maya and a dream, except when the feeling of fear is aroused in the minds of the ignorant. Mahamadi, the ignorant and the simple-minded are addicted to the views of being and non-being, and are liable to tremble at our teaching. Mahamadi, let them not be frightened away from the Mahayana. So it is said. There is no self-nature, no thought construction, no reality, no alaya vijnana. These indeed are so many discriminations cherished by the ignorant, who, like a corpse, are bad logicians. All things are unborn, this thesis is established by all the philosophers, but nothing whatever is ever born. No establishment is needed. Things are all linked by causation. All things are unborn. No such discrimination is made by transcendental knowledge. When a certain conclusion is made depending on a cause, there is no sound judgment in it. As a hairnet is what is wrongly perceived by those who are dim-eyed, so existence discriminated as real is due to the wrong discrimination of the ignorant. The triple world is no more than thought construction. There is no reality in its self-nature. By means of this thought-constructed reality, logicians go on discriminating. Individual form, reality, thought construction, these are only a mental disturbance. Transcending all this, my sons will walk where there is no discrimination. As in a mirage in the air, the thought of water is cherished where there is no water. So things are seen by the ignorant otherwise than by the wise. The insight of the wise, who move about in the realm of imagelessness, is pure, is born of the triple emancipation, is released from birth and destruction. Where all things are wiped away, even a state of imagelessness ceases to exist for the practicant. In the sameness of existence and non-existence, the fruit of wisdom is born to the wise. See, if you understand moment-to-moment instantiation of potential, then the electron isn't a permanent thing. It's a manifestation of a larger field of potential happening moment to moment. How does existence cease to exist? How does the sameness take place? When the mind fails to understand the truth, there is disturbance inside, outside, and in the middle. With the cessation of the disturbance, the mind sees sameness. In other words, equanimity, everything, moment to moment. Right? The process itself. Life without boundaries, because boundaries indicate areas of reality and non-reality. But that's the process is the process. It's happening constantly, everywhere, all the time. This idea of time-space is a narrow understanding of energy in formation with tendencies and conditions all around, just as we are. We bear witness to the process of life, of potential manifesting in every form. Being part of that momentum of energy, rather than being anchored, identified as a narrow spectrum of that energy. Again, I struggle with the words to define this separateness yet sameness. Because only by ungluing ourselves from possession do we finally get it all. It's the act of possessing that limits our understanding of life. I'm not saying you can't have your things. I'm saying that how you think about those things. This is what Shakyamuni is struggling with explaining to Mahamati. It's not that you can't be a farmer and grow vegetables and so on and so forth. It's not a denial of any of that. It's the idea that your identity, farmer, is who you are. You're just choosing potentials. You're just playing in the great process of life. We're going to end here. And we're going to get into this even more deeply. So hopefully Shakyamuni will come up with some key words to help us take this imaginative leap of mind. Because in the final analysis, Buddhism has a profound respect for everything, because everything is a manifestation of life. Nothing is more precious, right? Without it, there would be no sentient mind to witness it. That's our whole purpose in being. It's not a denial of our humanity. It's a better, a deeper, a more broad, an equanimous experience of humanity. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. We will continue with the Lankavatara in the next one. I trust you'll be here, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon, probably tomorrow. Okay? In the meantime, bye for now.